Intro.
Hey guys, we're so thankful that you're back for the next edition and episode of the Redeemed Podcast Marriage Podcast? Redeemed Marriage Podcast.
Take
Is
two.
that right?
Redeemed Marriage Podcast. Here we go. Take two intro.
Hey guys, we're so glad y'all are back.
Take three.
Hey guys, we are so glad that you're back for this episode in the Redeemed Marriage Podcast. I'm doing the intro today because I'm getting him back. Today is a surprise topic for him. He doesn't know what we're talking about, but I want you to come right back to find out.
Hey, I'm Rusty.
And I'm Heather.
We're the Bryants with Three Strands Marriage Ministry, and this is the Redeemed Marriage Video Podcast.
We are here to encourage healthy marriages, strengthen wounded marriages, and begin the process of restoration to broken marriages.
We're not licensed counselors, however, we are a redeemed couple that loves the Lord and wants to help you journey through this messy, challenging, and fun part of life called marriage.
Hey guys, I'm so excited about this episode because it is a...
Me too. I have no idea what we're doing.
I'm going to surprise him and get him back for last week. I've had several of my friends ask, do y'all really do that in one take? And we do. We've only had to start over one time. It's because I had a sneezing fit.
Well, and the intro that we just did, which was three takes.
I'm not good at the intros. But anyway, so yes, we do this in one take, and yes, this really is a surprise to him. He bragged on me a little bit last week, and it made me sweat. And I needed to return the favor, but I needed to return it in a way that is helpful to you guys and to show you such a power example of how to be the hands and feet of Christ in your marriage. There will come times, it may not be to the extreme that ours was, but there will come a time in your marriage where God is asking you to forgive your spouse. It may not be, like I said, am I supposed to forgive my spouse being unfaithful? But there will be many times in your relationship that you have to forgive, and maybe not even at a time that you want to forgive or you think that they deserve your forgiveness. And I'm going to let Rusty talk about that a little bit more, but I just kind of wanted to get him in the direction where I feel like God is asking us to speak into for this. You know, when Rusty and I went through this 9.5 years ago, we didn't have many resources. We've said that before. Like we especially him, were like, I don't even know where to step forward with this. And that was challenging. And one of the main reasons we wanted to do these podcasts is for people to have a resource for God honoring biblical responses to marriage. And that's what I hope to do. We had a lot of people, and you can speak more into this in a minute, but I can remember having people tell Rusty he better get out while he could. Like friends. We had friends that were like, dude, you don't have to forgive this. We had people say that you have the right to divorce her, which biblically you did. And people who actually quit even being our friends because of what we went through and because of the decisions that I made. There weren't a lot of people to come alongside you to walk through this journey. And it was just a really, really hard time for our marriage because we lost friendships. We lost connections that we had had for a long time, and we didn't know how to step forward in any way, much less forgiveness. So when I confessed to Rusty my whole story, when everything came out into the open, thankfully our children were at school. and we were alone, and there was an intense anger and rage, furniture being pushed around and thrown, and a lot of yelling, which, I mean, you can understand, and a lot of hurt, and it scared me to death. I'd never seen that side of him. But then we came to find out later, our counselor said that was actually a good thing. But to be able to walk through not just the years past this, but the minutes and the days and the weeks and the months that then turned into years with this man is something that I'll never forget. It could have had such a different outcome. I talked with somebody this past week about their marriage was going through something very similar, and neither one of them really wanted any reconciliation. And I just thought, God, this could have turned out completely different. It could have been such a different story. And I am so blessed and so humbled to have been with somebody who was able to forgive, and not only forgive, but encourage me to be the woman that God wanted me to be. So I just wanted you to talk a little bit about how you felt. And again, this may not be what you have to forgive your spouse for. It may be, but it could be something completely different. But how you felt in that, how you were then able to move towards forgiveness, and what you think that God was calling you to do in our marriage.
All right.
I mean, nothing deep.
When I threw mine at you last week, it wasn't near this deep.
Well, this is what, I mean, Mike, when I think back to our story, this is the part that always blows my mind.
Well, I mean, first of all, you mentioned the whole anger, and the righteous anger is what I have come to understand that to be. And when everything first happened, I mean, I was mad. I was mad at you. I was angry. I was mad at God. I mean, very, very angry at God. I can remember exactly where I was when I literally cursed at God as I was praying and talking through things. And the more I have learned about this and what I went through, not only was it very normal, obviously it was normal for me to be angry, but it was actually very healthy, and we learned that because we could have been in a point in our marriage where it happened and I just was like, okay, fine, and then walked away. Mm-hmm. But by showing the anger, it showed that I believed that there was something there worth fighting for. Mm-hmm. And so, that would be the first thing that I would say, when something like this happens in a marriage, like really look at yourself, and the emotions, they're going to range, and it's okay that everybody doesn't have the same emotions, but, you really need to look inside and say, well, okay, am I even mad about this? And hopefully you are in a situation where you are mad enough to say there's something here worth fighting for. And so, as we went through those early days, like, I was not in a place where I was ready to forgive you, which is also very normal. When you lose a dream, I read lots and lots of books. In fact, I just told a friend yesterday, I was sending over some suggestions for books to read, and I said, I really started reading a lot after we went through what we went through, because from August to January, so less than 6 months, I read over 30 books on marriage. And they weren't all specific to marriage, but they were all specific to what I mean, they were all very much related to what I was going through and what we were going through. And so, like you said, it was just resources. What can I find? What can I find? What can I find that will help me? And so I did lots and lots of studying and tried to figure out. And one of the things, a book I read called Shattered Dreams, and that's what I realized was that, like, the dream that I had for our marriage was shattered, like completely gone. Everything that I thought about our marriage was dead. And so, like, I literally went through the stages of grief. And so you can go and you can look at any counseling book, you can look anywhere and see those stages of grief. And you realize that as I was going through this, like, those stages of grief were happening. Sometimes they were spread far apart over weeks. Sometimes I would literally go through them all throughout the day. And the best book that I read that kind of summed all that up was a book by David Stoop called Forgiving the Unforgivable. Probably the most effective and best book that I read throughout the whole thing. And now there's actually a book that Lisa TerKeurst, I'm actually reading it right now, but Lisa TerKeurst, which a lot of y'all will know who she is, but she and her husband recently went through the exact same thing. Her husband had an affair that extended over a long period of time, and so she wrote a book recently about forgiveness, and so good. And I would recommend that. But I know that when it first happened, I was not ready to forgive again, which is very, very normal. I was in protection mode. I'm taking care of myself. I'm taking care of my kids, and you're not going to have any part of that until at that point it was, you're not going to have any part of that. But I started gradually learning just about the biblical side of all this, and like you already mentioned, adultery. There is a biblical basis for divorce when it comes to adultery, but there's also a very strong verse in the Old Testament, at the very end of the Old Testament, leading into the New Testament, that literally says God hates divorce. And so when you put those things together and you really start thinking about it, it's kind of like, well, I'm off the hook there, but I know what God prefers and what God desires, what God wants. And what God wants is that there's a vow that I made to you and a vow that you made to me, and you broke those vows, but that was something that I could still honor and keep by keeping our marriage together. And so as I started learning about just what it meant to forgive, I realized there's I could really talk about this forever and ever, and I'm not going to do that, but there's so many complexities to forgiveness. But the biggest thing that I learned was that forgiveness, it is a moment in time. So there came a point where, regardless of what you were doing and regardless of how you were changing, whether you were changing or not, that biblically I knew that I had to get to a place where I could say, okay, I forgive you for hurting me. No matter if you care that you hurt me, no matter if you've changed, no matter if you want to reconcile right, if you don't, even if you don't want to reconcile this relationship, in order for me to release it and let go of it, then I have to forgive you. And basically it's I knew that otherwise I would always be in bondage. I would always be a slave to the unforgiveness. And so I know that there came a time where along the way where I said, yes, I choose to forgive you. Now, then the rest of the forgiveness story is, it's a moment in time, but it's also a process. And that process literally had to happen every single day. And it was a choice that I was having to wake up and say, I'm gonna choose to forgive you, and I'm gonna choose to, as I'm forgiving you, work through this reconciliation. Right. There's also a lot of myths about forgiveness that means that in order to forgive, if you forgive, then you're saying that it's okay for what they did. And that's so not true. Again, forgiveness is not as much for that person as it is for yourself. And so I had to really wrestle with that because I didn't want it to ever be like, okay, I want her to know that I forgave her. And there is that in the back of your mind saying, well, if I do that, she's going to think, well, then it was okay. You know, it's okay that I did that and I can do it again because he's just going to forgive me again. It's not that at all. It is I'm recognizing that I have to do this for me. And she gets the benefit of it. You know, the person that you're forgiving gets the benefit of being forgiven. But it's really just to remove that weight. And then the process of forgiveness and moving on through that, so many people think that in order to fulfill forgiveness, that there has to be reconciliation. And that's not always true either. There are times and people that you will forgive along the way and you won't reconcile, and quite honestly, there's sometimes you don't need to reconcile. And I know that I had to sit and have conversations with other people that were involved in this, and I had to tell them that I did forgive them. And I did forgive them, but I wanted no reconciliation whatsoever. And there doesn't, for health reasons and reasons for relationships, there doesn't need to be reconciliation in those circumstances. So, but for you and me, in order for us to move forward with our marriage, we had to start both moving towards reconciliation. The first step was that I had to forgive you. Like there's no way that a marriage that has been damaged by anything, one side or the other, there's no way to move towards reconciliation until the person that's been harmed is able to forgive.
That's right.
And once the forgiveness happens, then you can start working towards that. Another big part of of forgiveness is, you always hear that God tells us to forgive and forget, and that's a bunch of baloney as well. As you're forgiving, you don't want to forget those things because first of all, you don't want to sweep anything under the rug ever, but also you remember things that caused you to have to forgive, and those things are the things that mature you, that grow you, and also it's because, whoa, I remember this, and I'm not getting hurt like this again. I always think of Matt Chandler and he told a story in one of his sermons about this lady that every single time she would come and talk to him, she would get so close to him that she would step on his toes. And he was like, silly example, I know. He said, but he's like, I forgave her for stepping on my toes. It hurts, but I forgave her, but I never forgot it because every time she would come close to me, I would always take a step back because I didn't want her stepping on my toes again. And so that's part of the forgiveness too, is that you don't want to forget because you want to remember what it was that hurt you. And so that you can make sure that you're not hurt in that way again.
And, something that you do, and I didn't mean to interrupt, but something I know that you do so well is even though you don't forget, you don't throw it at me all the time. And I think that would be very easy to do. You forgive, but let me remind you what you did. And you don't do that to me ever. And as you were talking, there's probably a handful of people that can relate to exactly what you're talking about, probably more than that. But even there might be more people out there that can't relate to the deep forgiveness that you're talking about for that. But I mean, this could be anything from, a spouse being involved with pornography and asking for forgiveness from that. You forgive, you don't forgive and forget, but it's a forgiveness that's a process. And it could be just from your spouse treating you unfairly. I mean, it's not just this one thing. And that's what I wanted to...
Well, this is there's just so much to this, again, that we could talk forever. And we've always said that we're going to try to keep our podcast to where you can actually sit down and watch it in a short time. And so it may be something that we need to talk about again at some other time, but there is so many different things that you have to learn to forgive, and as you're forgiving, like Heather said, you can't once you forgive, you can't then just hold that over their head. Now, like I said, it doesn't mean that you've forgotten, but you've released it. I mean, you've released it, you've released them, you've released, the hurt that you have, and you're moving forward. You can move forward by having discussions, and it's okay to tell your spouse when you're still hurting, and we've talked about that with the triggers and things that happen. You still talk about those things. You don't just sweep it under the rug and be done with it. But you have, at that point, you've told your spouse, I'm not going to hold this over your head.
That's right.
Which, I mean, there's plenty of times. And like, I even remember after you said it, in that position of vulnerability that we were both in, and that position of immaturity that we were both in. I mean, I remember you, as you were trying to say, take me back, or whatever you were trying to say, you said, hey, for the rest of your life, you now are in charge, basically. And like, I mean, and there's a sense of evil power that comes along with that there's a part of me that wants to go, yeah, that's right. I mean, because I didn't do this and you did this and look what I did. And but you just can't do that, because that's no way for either one of you to live. And I really believe that if you live your life that way, then you haven't truly forgiven.
Sure.
And I've told you this before, and I've said this before, but I knew that I forgave you. But when you had cancer, and when you got diagnosed with cancer 4 years ago, that was the time that it clicked with me, and I realized that I had truly forgiven you, because like, I genuinely, as soon as you found that out, I wanted to take the cancer from you. Like, I would have gladly taken it, and I would have fought the cancer battle for you. And I remember thinking, whoa, like, I really wanted her to be dead a few years ago. Like in all seriousness, if you had died, it would have been just fine with me. So, but I didn't plan to kill you or anything. But I really, when I genuinely knew that I would have taken any of that for you, I knew that I had really forgiven you.
Sure.
So, yeah, you really did catch me off guard. And, I mean, I could talk about
and
this.
I really think that forgiveness is something that we could do several episodes on, in the process of forgiveness. And I'd love to spend one just on that moment of forgiveness. I mean, it's powerful to talk about. And there's not a relationship or a wife or husband that is listening to us that hasn't needed to seek forgiveness, and who hasn't needed to forgive.
Yeah.
So it may be something that we can come back to, but I just felt God just saying that there's somebody out there, if not multiple people, to know that there's hope and forgiveness. That there's hope and forgiveness, or there's somebody out there that is holding on to a grudge or to hurt or to pain, that just needs to forgive and to see that there's freedom.
Yeah. I remember a lot of times going in the early days, I kept saying, why me? Why me? And I remember one day I was in the shower, and I remember God just clearly saying, why not you? And then I kind of changed everything around, my whole way of thinking. What then became not, why me? Why did this why did this happen to me? Why did she do this to me? Why did God allow this to happen to me? Because I believe that God is sovereign, and He could have stopped it at any moment. Right. But He allowed it to happen because there was a journey that you and I both needed to go through. And so when I heard God say, why not you? Then I turned the whole thing around, and it became, I've been chosen. Like, I've been chosen to be a part of your journey. And like, God knew that I would be able to be the one to journey through this with you. That's right. And He knew that in order to get your heart, that He had to allow this to happen. And as a part of that, I was a part of the battle and got all the, a lot of the effects of it. But I was also able to have the honor of walking through that. And so, to turn it and be able to go, man, God chose me, for this. God chose me for this journey. It's just an incredible way of turning things. And look, again, so many people are not in this deep of an issue that they're having to forgive, but everybody's issue is that important to them right now.
That's right.
And, we can, there's nothing that anybody's going through that we would make light of.
That's right.
And so,
Yep.
as you're going through this, just know that, your pain and what you're suffering through, your emotions, they're real, and they're worth dealing with, and they're worth getting into and to get to the bottom of, and they're worth forgiveness.
That's right.
So.
That's right. Guys, thank y'all for joining us today. Thank you for being vulnerable and walking through that forgiveness process again. It kind of just stings every time, doesn't it?
Yep, it does. It does.
It brings back lots of emotions and feelings, and but I know that one thing that we've learned above everything else is that we can trust God with our story. And I'm thankful that you're sitting here and we're doing this, and I'm thankful for the man that you are, and I'm glad God chose you to walk through this journey with me. We will see y'all next week, and no surprises next week.
Surprises.
We'll come up with
Hey, it's gonna be Valentine's Day.
Oh, like literally?
Yeah.
Yes, it's on a Sunday. Come back for Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
Bye.
See you next week.